Preparation for the United Nations Association's Test of English.
Continuing from the last time, this is question number 5 of the expression series that can be used as it is, in essays and interviews. Question: the UN and its specialized agencies have undertaken various activities to mitigate the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Explain briefly, concrete examples of your choice.
Dr. Cape has drafted 15 sample answers. All the answers are convincing contents, unique to Dr. Cape, who is familiar with the UN situation, and summarize the activities and results of the United Nations and its specialized agencies in an easy-to-understand manner. We hope you find it useful for your exam preparation. Let's quickly take a look at the list of 15 patterns. 1. The UN Secretariat, 2. The UN Secretary-General, 1, 3. The UN Secretary-General, 2, 4. The UN General Assembly, April, the 74th GA session. 5. The UN General Assembly, September, the 74th GA session. 6. The UN Security Council, SC, 7. The UN Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, 8. The Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO. 9. The Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, 10. UNESCO, 11. The UN Human Rights Council, UNHRC, 12. UNICEF, 13. UN Women, 14. World Tourism Organization, UNWTO. 15. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. I hope you find an answer that matches your opinion. Now let's read them together. The UN Secretariat. In June 2020, the UN Secretariat issued the UN Comprehensive Response to COVID-19, a policy document aiming at the UN system-wide coordination. Specifically, under the policy banner of Save Lives, Protect Societies, Recover Better, the document focuses on 3 main operational approaches. 1. To deliver a large coordinated and comprehensive response on health. 2. To adopt policies to address the adverse human rights, humanitarian, and socio-economic, humanitarian effects, and 3. To create a recovery process that builds back better. The Secretariat has issued policy briefs, by theme, population, and region, to aid governments in how to address the consequences of the pandemic.
The UN Secretary-General. Since early months of 2020, the Secretary-General has ensured the maintenance of normal UN operations, as much as possible in the midst of the persistent COVID-19 disaster. He has launched various diplomatic events and campaigns, including the fundraising, on behalf of the UN system. Upholding the campaign of the world's first global ceasefire, the Secretary-General has also defended the WHO's response to the pandemic crisis, and called up all to fight against misinformation.
The UN Secretary-General. On October 1, 2020, the Secretary-General launched the annual report of the United Nations, which included a special section devoted to the pandemic. He notes, among others, that pandemic recovery must be measured in human rather than economic terms.
The UN General Assembly, April, the 74th GA session. The international community has so far adopted 4 resolutions, in the 74th session, 2 in April and 2 in September 2020. Which all address the COVID-19. 2 resolutions that were adopted in April were entitled Global Solidarity, to fight the coronavirus disease 2019, and International Cooperation to ensure global access to medicines, vaccines and medical equipment to face COVID-19. The first resolution reaffirms the GA's commitment to multilateral cooperation, with the UN system playing the central role, and emphasizes that the need for human rights should be respected during the pandemic. The second resolution urges international cooperation on equitable global access to medical equipment, treatment, and vaccines.
The UN General Assembly, September, the 74th GA session. The 2 resolutions adopted in last September are entitled Comprehensive and Coordinated Response to the COVID-19 Pandemic and United Response Against Global Health Threats, Combating COVID-19. In both resolutions, the international community called for intensified multilateral cooperation in handling disease outbreaks. By sharing timely, accurate and transparent information, exchanging epidemiological and clinical data, and sharing materials necessary for research and development.
The UN Security Council, SC, in July 2020, the SC adopted one resolution directly addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, maintenance of international peace and security, demanding a global ceasefire, in order to provide humanitarian access to the world's most vulnerable and conflict zones. On September 24, 2020, the SC hosted a summit-level debate on the theme, Maintenance of International Peace and Security, Global Governance After COVID-19, to discuss further the need for global governance reform, to strengthen convergence towards sustainable global peace and security.
The UN Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, which is responsible for strategizing the UN economic and social response to the COVID-19 pandemic, has been warning of the impact of the pandemic on achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, UN SDGs. On July 7, 2020, Mona Jewell, president of ECOSOC, addressing the inaugural meeting of the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, noted that the dramatic impacts of the pandemic had revealed weaknesses in our systems and societies, and warned that a new dynamic was needed to address the negative shocks.
The Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, in July 2020, Director General of the FAO, launched its comprehensive COVID-19 response and recovery program to ward off a global food emergency during and after the pandemic, and to provide medium to long-term development responses for food security and nutrition, costing an initial $1.2 billion investment.
The Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, in June 2020, the OHCHR called for an urgent action to address the major disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on racial and ethnic minorities. The office has urged various countries to honor the right to freedom of expression, following an alarming clampdown on freedom of expression during the COVID-19 crisis.
UNESCO has highlighted the need to fight COVID-19 misinformation and the plight of children's education during the pandemic, and attempted to address this through research and policy briefs. Last March, UNESCO already announced that 290 million students globally were stuck at home, and its number had grown to 1 billion in July. In July 2020, UNESCO also stated that increased pillaging of endangered World Heritage sites during the COVID-19 lockdowns would likely result in a large number of artifacts stolen. UNCTAD highlighted the need to ensure education for refugee children, launching in last August a new UNESCO policy brief, Education During COVID-19 and Beyond, the Future of Education is Here.
The UN Human Rights Council, UNHRC. The UNHRC has warned of the impact on individual human rights. Last March, a group of 42 experts representing nearly every independent rights specialist working within the UNHRC mandated system stressed that in addition to public health and emergency measures to counter the COVID-19 pandemic, countries had to respect the fundamental individual human rights.
UNICEF. Since last March, UNICEF has been actively offering advice and conducting research on the impact of COVID-19 on children, highlighting especially the plight of vulnerable children, including child refugees in fragile states, particularly the problem of maintaining routine vaccination. Last July, UNICEF, together with the WHO, called for immediate efforts to vaccinate all children in order to avoid the pandemic worsening access, a problem affecting over 100 countries.
UN Women. It is feared that the pandemic is threatening to erase decades of progress for women and girls, despite the fact that women have enormously contributed to mitigating the pandemic's impacts. Last April, Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed launched a new women-led initiative to mobilize support to save lives and protect livelihoods in the face of the pandemic. Rise for All, a social and economic recovery initiative to bring women leaders together in calling the world to action in support of the UN Response and Recovery Fund and Framework.
World Tourism Organization, UNWTO. Last April, the UNWTO Secretary General warned that tourism, which accounts for 10% of global GDP, could lose millions of jobs but offered potential for an economic recovery.
The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, the 2020 Trade and Development Report, TDR, the flagship report by the UNCTAD Secretariat, says that the coronavirus pandemic was a catalyst, rather than the cause of the current economic crisis. The report documents the hyper-inequalities that existed in the aftermath of the 2008 to 2009 financial crisis.
As of November 2020, as the number of people infected with corona continues to increase around the world, expectations are high for the comprehensive and systematic activities of the United Nations. There is no doubt that many people need help in the face of an inevitable global recession. I hope that the spirit and cooperation system, in accordance with the UN Charter, will be realized.
Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Cheers.